Okay, welcome to part 3 now of our and final version, final part anyway, of our trip through the digestive system. Last video we covered all the way up to the ileocecal sphincter, and so now we're going to begin the very tail end of our journey here with the large intestine. This is the last segment, the GI tract, and we're going to divide this out into 7 basic chunks. Okay, the one right on the other side of the ileocecal sphincter, of course, is the cecum. Okay, and there we're going to have the ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, the sigmoid colon. Sigmoid just means S-shaped. The rectum and the anal canal. All of these, except for the transverse colon and the sigmoid colon, are retroperitoneal. Okay, they're almost all of the large intestine is retroperitoneal. The duodenum, most of the large intestine are going to be behind that peritoneal cavity. We've also got a couple of other interesting little features here we don't see anywhere else. We have an appendix which hangs off of the cecum. This is a bacterial storehouse. This is part of where the gut flora resides. Okay, so the bacteria that live in your large intestine and break down stuff, we'll talk about in the next slide. This is kind of a little refuge area. So if they get wiped out from the colon itself, they can recolonize it from there. Other features of the large intestine that are going to be different from other things, and again, we'll see cartoons of these in a little bit. They've got bands of muscle that run the length of the large intestine called taenia coli. Okay, the scientific name for the tapeworm is taenia. So if that helps you remember kind of what this look like, that's what they are. Taenia just means tape. Okay, basically colon tape is what this means in Latin. And then this taenia coli has the effect of kind of bunching or pouching or blousing out the large intestine to little pouches. These little pouches here are called haustra. Okay. Attached to the taenia coli, we have the epiploic appendages, which are little tiny little droplets of fat. We'll see what those look like in a little bit. Don't know what they're for, but they're always there. As far as what the large intestine is there to do, it's basically just storage. Okay. Once we have moved across the ileocecal boundary, we are poop, right? We are feces at this point. There is essentially nothing left in here for us to get out of this. Okay. We get a little bit of vitamin out of here, okay, but the vitamins that we pull out of here are ones that are digested by that bacterial flora. Vitamin K, vitamin B, some vitamin B complexes, but that's about it. Maybe a little salt, maybe a little water, okay, but it really doesn't do anything significant. Okay, it really honestly doesn't. Food hangs out in here a little bit longer than it does in the small intestine, about 12 to 24 hours, give or take. So while you might have had to go rushing for the toilet after your Taco Bell breakfast, it's not the Taco Bell that's coming out, I guess is what I'm saying there. Those bacteria here come in one way or the other, right? Come in from the small intestine. So we develop a gut flora early on if we breastfeed. So we get a lot of those bacteria that way. We also get a lot coming the other direction. And basically they live in there to feed on the stuff that we can't digest. And we permit this because they don't really do any harm. And we do get a little bit of good out of it, right? So a handful of B vitamins, vitamin K, things that we wouldn't otherwise get out of this, okay? We get kind of in return for allowing bacteria in our butt. The downside of this, right, is that they make about half a liter a day of unpleasant gas, right? This is farts, right? So obviously they're not perfect. Here is our large intestine in all of its glory. So we've got the tail end of the ileum here and the ileocecal valve or the ileocecal sphincter right there, which means that on the other side of this must be the cecum, which is what this guy is right here, and the appendix hanging off of that. Okay. From there, we're going to enter the ascending colon. So at this point, feces travels up, okay? And then we make a little turn, right? This little turn that we make is called the right colic flexure or the hepatic flexure. Called the hepatic flexure because it's on the liver side, right? And then we transition from there into the transverse colon. So this is going to be where the greater omentum attaches. So it goes from the greater curvature of the stomach to the transverse colon here. Then we make another turn at the left colic or the splenic flexure because we're on the spleen side, right? So liver side, spleen side. And we come down, and we come down through the descending colon. And then we travel through this S-shaped part right here. And you can kind of see the S. This is the sigmoid colon. Okay. This guy and this guy are intraperitoneal. All the rest of this is retroperitoneal, remember. Sigmoid colon, into the rectum, into the anal canal, and then we're done. Slightly different view here. Again, just showing us this greater omentum attached here to the transverse colon. Again, this would flap down and then come back up and attach to the greater curvature of the stomach up here. You can see here one of 3 rectal valves in the rectum. These are little flaps. When you hold in both a fart, technically the term for a fart is flatus, F-L-A-T-U-S, or feces from being passed. These rectal valves kind of help hold that stuff back a little bit. But the primary means of control here are 2 sphincter muscles. We have an internal anal sphincter here, this guy right there, and right there. And we have an external anal sphincter here. The internal anal sphincter is smooth muscle, and so it is therefore under autonomic control. The external anal sphincter is skeletal muscle, and therefore is under conscious control. Moving food or feces at this point through the large intestine is done by haustral contraction. So we contract those Taenia coli muscles and you squeeze the thing together. The primary means of movement through here is done via the gastrocolic reflex. So like the gastro-ileal reflex before, presence of food in the stomach inducing movement through the small intestine. Here, the gastrocolic reflex, move feces through the large intestine, again, because there's food in the stomach. Basically, it's somebody in the on-deck circle pressuring you to get on base or get out. Results in somewhere between 3 or 4 fairly powerful peristaltic waves a day. We call these mass movements. Right? This is because usually you eat 3 to 4 fairly decent sized meals a day. Obviously, if you eat more meals, more of these waves will occur. The actual act of defecation is partly autonomic and partly somatic for reasons we just saw on the other slide, right? The internal anal sphincter is entirely autonomic. It's under parasympathetic control. So it opens and you got nothing to say about it. But you get to choose because the external anal sphincter is skeletal muscle. It is under conscious control. And so you can hold that back, so to speak. Okay, so we've passed our way all the way through from mouth to the other end. Here now, finally, last little chunk of anatomy, right? There are 2 fairly important accessory organs we haven't covered yet. First of these is the liver. The liver does just a lot. It does a huge amount of stuff. The only function here in the digestive system is the production of bile. Right? And again, bile is there to emulsify fats, to allow us to transport fats in droplet form in our blood and other bodily fluids. It is a gland. It is the largest gland in the body, and we're going to divide it up into 4 different lobes, and we'll see those in the next couple slides. So right in the left lobe, and a caudate, which means tail, and a quadrate, which means 4th lobe. Because it is a gland, it has a higher sort of regenerative capacity. You can take 4/5 of somebody's liver out, and then when 6 months to a year's time, they'll have a whole liver again. Really is truly an amazing organ. So here we've got an anterior view, right? So this would be the right side, okay? So the right colic flexure would be here, right? The right lobe of the liver separated from the left lobe of the liver by this guy right here. This is the falciform ligament, okay? This is the anterior mesentery. So we saw very beginning, very first video, we had anterior mesenteries. This is part of that anterior mesentery system. We also have this little dude right here, the round ligament, the ligamentum teres. I don't like the term ligamentum teres because there's several of those. Of course, there's also several round ligaments in your body, so they're all equally bad. The round ligament, or the ligamentum teres of the liver, is the remnant of the umbilical vein. So when you were in your mom, you had an umbilical vein and an umbilical artery. That umbilical vein remains here inside as this round ligament. Poking out just at the bottom here, you can see the gallbladder. So we're going to flip this guy around. Let's see him from the back. Here, right smack dab in the middle of this whole thing, we've got this little groove. This is where the inferior vena cava would pass. Okay, right through there. Right lobe of the liver over here again. Right, so this dude here. Our gallbladder nestled, tucked right here into the right lobe. Here's our left lobe there. Between the left lobe and the right lobe, or between the left lobe and the gallbladder on the back side, we have the quadrate lobe down here, the fourth lobe. And then this guy right here, you can't really appreciate it from this view, but he sticks out like a little tail, like a little kind of projection. He sticks out. And so this guy right there, we call that the caudate lobe, or the tail lobe of the liver. As a digestive function here, again, remember we're just making bile. Now, we've talked about bile before. It's sort of greenish, yellowish, kind of baby poop green color, right? It's a lot of bicarbonate. It's got bile salts in it there to emulsify those fats again. And the reason it's a sort of baby poop green, remember this is bilirubin. This is the middle stage of our breakdown of hemoglobin, of heme pigment, right? Heme to bilirubin to stercobilin at the very end. We make this stuff not constantly, but close to it. And so we store it in the gallbladder until we need it. The other big accessory organ here is the pancreas. Pancreas does two different things. It has endocrine and exocrine function. In the endocrine system, we talked about this end of the term first semester. This is the production of insulin and glucagon to regulate blood glucose levels. These are produced by the islet cells, the pancreatic islets. The exocrine function, the acini cells here secrete pancreatic juice. Again, I don't know why this autocorrected here and nowhere else. Chyme with a Y, again, helps to neutralize that out, but it also contains digestive enzymes for carbs and for fats. So here we've got one acinus of the pancreas. This is not the pancreas as a whole. This is one acinus with a acinar cells within it producing these pancreatic juices. So to sum up here kind of what's breaking things down, where things are being absorbed. In the next chapter, we'll talk about three major nutrients: lipids, proteins, and carbs. Lipids get digested in the mouth a little bit, the stomach, fair amount, the stomach or the small intestine also. And the enzyme responsible for each of these things, right? Lingual lipase, gastric lipase, bile, and pancreatic lipases. All absorption happens in the small intestine. For proteins, it's just the stomach and the small intestine via pepsin or trypsin, but again, absorption only small intestine. Carbs, broken down in the mouth, salivary amylases, small intestine, broken down by pancreatic amylases, again, absorbed only in the small intestine. Okay, so where do things go wrong, right? Well, generally, when we think about things going wrong, we think about malabsorption of nutrients, an inability to properly absorb nutrients. So a couple of different root causes are pretty typical of this. If we can't deliver bile or pancreatic juices, right, so that duodenal papilla gets clogged or what have you, okay, then we're out of luck, particularly with fats. Or if the intestinal mucosa itself, you have a bacterial infection, or ironically enough, some antibiotics can also damage it. If that gets broken down in the space between when it's damaged and when it gets repaired, you can't absorb anything. Something we see a lot, we hear about a lot these days, is called gluten sensitive enteropathy, right, or celiac disease. This is a really awful thing to have happen to you. You have an immune reaction to gluten, okay? And gluten is present in basically all grains except for rice and corn, which really limits what you can eat, kind of a problem. What ends up happening is you destroy your intestinal mucosa. And so not only is it incredibly painful, but you also become malnourished as a result of it. You will hear a lot about quote unquote gluten sensitivity. This is not celiac disease. There's actually a fairly large body of evidence to suggest it doesn't exist at all. I don't know. For me, I guess the thing is, if you feel better not eating carbs or not eating gluten, excuse me, then go for it. Okay, you don't need a medical excuse to not eat gluten if you don't want to. It makes you feel better. It's not hurting anybody. Go for it. But if it's a lifestyle choice and not an enteropathy, and there's one box of gluten-free something on the shelf, maybe leave it behind for somebody who might have celiac, because otherwise they might not eat. I guess that's my 2 cents on it. Just a little bit of developmental biology here. We're going to begin very, very early on with the development of 2 different membranes, an oral membrane, which becomes the mouth, and the cloacal membrane, which becomes the anus. Because we are deuterostomes, this one forms first. We are butt first, as you might imagine from literally being alive in the last, however many years. A lot of us never really moved past this point, I guess. I'm just kidding. And by fairly early on, by about week 5, the oral membrane, the cloacal membrane have fused. We have a continuous alimentary canal all the way through. We're not really using it, but it's there, okay? And very, very shortly thereafter, accessory organs are going to butt off of it. Now that's going to be obviously the liver, things like that, but also things like your lungs are of digestive system origin. Also your anterior pituitary, of all things. So again, just kind of early and slightly later early development here. We go from a continuous tube here to a series of different structures butting off of that. Now again, remember, when you're in utero, you're not eating, right? All of your nutrition, all of those requirements are entirely from mom, okay? But you are going to practice eating. You are going to swallow amniotic fluid. Now, there's no easy way around this. What ends up happening then, because it's just fluid, there's no nutrients in it, you simply excrete all of that swallowed amniotic fluid as urine. So within a very short period of time, you spend most of your time in utero floating around in your own urine. Again, it just is what it is. Once you're free of that urine prison and you're outside of the womb, we have a couple of reflexes here that are designed to keep us alive. So we have a rooting reflex. If you've ever had a baby or have known somebody who had a baby, you'll see them kind of snuffling around like a pig looking for a truffle. That's the rooting reflex. It helps them find the nipple itself. And then once they've latched onto the nipple, we have a sucking reflex that aids in swallowing. We're going to double our birth weight within 6 months on average, right? And in most parts of the Western world, we're on an adult diet by 2 years, if not earlier. Different parts of the world, particularly developing nations, things like that, sometimes weaning, which is what this is, takes place much, much later. It's very much a cultural thing. Here, it's abnormal, but different places it might or may not be. As always, no judgment either way. This is not what we're here to do. As you get old, so you get to be my age, you're obviously no longer worried about breastfeeding, but you get things like cholecystitis, ulcers, things that are just kind of bad. So these are polyps or cysts on your colon. You can also get diverticulosis and diverticulitis. Diverticulosis is when those haustra become stretched out, and so feces collect in them. This can lead to diverticulitis, which is inflammation of that haustra. They can also rupture if they're sufficiently full, or if the inflammation gets sufficiently bad, basically leaking feces into your abdominal cavity, which nobody wants to have happen. That can kill you pretty fast. Being really old, that diverticulosis, obviously diverticulitis, incontinence, cancer, all of those things become common. Things don't taste as good, things don't smell quite as good. Periodontal disease, which is diseases associated with the gums and the bone of your jaw resorbing. So your teeth fall out, things like that. Your GI tract itself no longer works very well. It just kind of sucks. And you often get to not just incontinence, right? So you can't hold it in, but oftentimes you get constipation building off of this as well. So getting old sucks, I guess, is kind of the way we close every chapter. Finally here, cancers here are extraordinarily dangerous when associated with the GI tract because they very rarely have any kind of early symptomatics. There's not really a lot of early warning signs for those things. Okay, and because of the way that the alimentary canal is connected to all kinds of things, if you have a cancer that is metastasizing, that is spreading, they can very readily spread to things like your liver. Okay, really the only means of trying to prevent any of this stuff is regular dental exams. Your dentist should be providing cancer screenings every time you go in. So if he's not or she's not, find a different dentist. If you're not going to the dentist, go to the damn dentist, because it's really one of those things that is your best chance at surviving these sorts of things. Okay, all right, so we'll close this chapter out here. On the next set of videos, we will talk about nutrition and then move on from